Good evening and welcome to Pershore High School's Year 8 New Parents meeting. Thank you very much indeed to those of you who are joining us live and obviously to those also who may be watching this on the recording. We very much appreciate you joining us this evening. Just to let you know, the two people facilitating the meeting are myself, Andrew Nocton, who's Deputy Head here at Pershore High School, and also I'll be handing over a little later to Zoe Budding, Assistant Head, who's in charge of our pastoral system. There's a number of things that we'd just like to cover this evening, which obviously we hope are most pertinent to the situation for yourselves as new parents and carers to the school, and also to the Year 8s who've recently joined us. We've divided these items into two. The first part of the meeting will look generally at the school's approach to learning, and the second section will look more at sort of student welfare issues. As well as a recording of this meeting being available, these PowerPoint slides will be available for reference on the school website from tomorrow. Should you wish just to refer to any of them, then you're able to do so. I would also just mention a slight apology that some of the slides, as in previous meetings that we've held, are relatively content heavy, and that is certainly so that they can be used for reference. So we don't intend to read through everything in every slide, but hope that you'll find them useful either during the meeting or as a reference point just afterwards. I would just like to start by saying that we're very pleased with how the Year 8s have settled in. It's been tremendous to get them in school after such a protracted transition period when unfortunately we weren't able to welcome the young people into school prior to September. And we must say they've really risen to the challenge of how they've found the school, obviously things being slightly different as we know them, although to them it's all new. But we're really impressed and pleased with how they've settled down, how they've taken to everything and started their career here at Pershore High School. Just moving on to the school's approach to learning and our first agenda item. For those of you that managed to join us back in July for our new intake meetings, I showed this slide about our approach to learning, and I think it's ever more important. One thing we've been very clear about with all students as they've come back to school, and it applies equally to the Year 8 students, is we've tried to introduce something which we're calling on our moving on curriculum. And what we mean by that is that we understand that students and parents and carers will have had very different experiences of lockdown and very different experiences of learning and connections with school over the previous 6 months. We really were quite keen to give every student a fresh start and not to be too backward looking, not to engage in what quite often is called the recovery curriculum or emphasise right from the outset of the need to be catching up, because we believe that this kind of approach can lead to a certain amount of anxiety among certain students, and we don't want that at all. So by trying to institute something of a fresh start, everybody starting from the same position, everybody starting with something new, we hope that that has led to something of a smoother transition for all students. The attributes on the slide, which are the ones that we're looking to develop in our students irrespective of the context, we believe actually are ever more important now. As we're in a period of uncertainty just with regard to learning, about our school systems being slightly different, obviously as we'll refer to the possibility going forward, unfortunately, of maybe some more periods of remote learning, it's really important that the students develop these attributes, and that's what we're starting from the outset to help them to develop, with the idea that they can become lifelong learners and learners who can adapt to the different contexts in which they find themselves. Part of the reason for talking to you this evening about this and just eliciting your support really is about how you can help the students at home to reinforce the types of messages that we are introducing in school. So we have a number of non-negotiables for our students, and some of them, the ones on this particular slide, reference how we expect the students to demonstrate scholarship whilst they're in school and in their work, and therefore replicate this if they're working at home on home learning or homework or during any subsequent period of lockdown. And similarly, a number of other things in which we know you can help us to reinforce these with the students to ensure that their time at school is as positive as possible. So in terms of the scholarship on the left, there's a number of things here that I don't think you'll be surprised by, and we know in many cases are a continuation of the good practices that came from middle school and before. But these are things that we expect in our work and that we require the students to do. On the right-hand side are some more behaviours that we're looking for from the rounded individuals of the students currently. And some of these I'll talk about in a little more detail. The only one, sadly, that I've left in the list, but clearly we can't expect directly at the moment, is the extracurricular activities. And that is just a sadness at the moment that obviously, given our current restrictions, the full extent of school life we're not able to offer the students at this stage. We very much hope that will happen in the future, clearly, but that's just not something that we are able to engage in at this particular moment. So these things are ever more important. It's important that we have a consistent approach for these within school, and would just ask for your support with these too, if you're supporting sons and daughters at home with this work. You may remember also that I introduced briefly in a previous meeting the idea of our Learn To curriculum. And our Learn To curriculum is a fortnightly lesson that we have with the students in a timetable sense that tries to develop the 5 R's. The 5 R's, we believe, are crucial to the development of lifelong learning, and they're there on the screen. And those R's all try to counteract something that we don't want the students to develop as an attribute. So we don't want students thinking who aren't able to think things through, who give up easily, don't know how to find things out, blame others for their failings and so on, but ultimately become very dependent. Through the use of the development of the 5 R's, we're trying to develop students who become independent, and that obviously is ever more important in our current context. So we have a fortnightly lesson which focuses on these things directly. We're obviously doing these things generally in a cross-curricular sense, and I'll explain later how also what we do in a home learning sense tries to develop these skills too. So just an overview and for reference, but the Learn To curriculum specifically looks like this. So in the autumn term, we focus on a number of things which reference our non-negotiables. And also, we're just trying to go through a period, we're very mindful of the need to engage students at the moment back into the socialisation of learning. So although we have our COVID restrictions, although we're making sure we're doing everything to control the virus, we are trying to make sure that we get students back up to speed into how they can work effectively in the classroom together as a class unit, in terms of oracy, in terms of literacy, in terms of group work, in terms of listening skills, in terms of contributions, in terms of leading discussions and communicating effectively. So all of these things involve the students trying to understand themselves a little bit better as a learner, and then trying to apply those things across the curriculum when they're in their other subjects. This moves on then into the spring term, looking at how to make good decisions. We look here particularly at the types of skills that lead to good independent study habits. And then in the third term, we look to apply these a little bit more through a period of lessons which we call Committed to Growth, which are all task-based and give the students opportunities to demonstrate the skills they've picked up in the autumn and spring term as to how they are developing as learners. One thing that's particularly important at the moment is that a number of students, not all by any means, but there might be an element of this for all students when they started with us, is that having a substantive period away from formal learning as they've recently experienced could lead to some questions about low confidence in learning and possible self-esteem issues when it comes to learning, even if these haven't been demonstrated or experienced in the past. And we've been very mindful of this in our Moving On curriculum. Another aspect of this curriculum is focusing on developing a positive mindset within the students and how we can promote this. And we'd ask again for your support at home into how you can try and emphasise this too. There's been a lot of research done on this, and you may be familiar with some of it, but I'll just outline it briefly, about the differences between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Someone who has a growth mindset, which is what we're looking to try and promote in the students, has the view that intelligence can be increased, that really what makes the difference is effort and persistence, and things such as mistakes and challenges that students face along the way are a way to grow and to make themselves better. And the evidence shows that students who have a growth mindset and teachers and parents and carers that promote a growth mindset, it can have a number of very positive outcomes in terms of improved attainment for the students, improved motivation, improved behaviours, and obviously general satisfaction that they feel and experience whilst at school. The opposite is that students who have a fixed mindset or are surrounded by people who promote a fixed mindset, if you like, what happens is that they don't feel as though they can improve too much. They feel as though what they're doing and how they are is something that they're born with. It can't really be changed, and therefore there's no point really in trying. And so obviously we're very much focused on the idea of promoting a positive mindset and a growth mindset. So how can we all help? How can we develop a growth mindset? Well, the focus for all of us, both here at school and also at home, is about growth feedback. It's also about that idea that when mistakes are made, they should be celebrated, they should be understood for what they are, and they should be learned from, because that's part of the growth process. So all of these things develop motivation, they develop success in the student, and they also promote resilience. There's a number of things that we might routinely say, both at home and at school, without thinking, that can encourage a fixed mindset. By saying somebody's not necessarily so good at something and not to worry, or to let's try and do something in a bit of an easier fashion rather than taking on the challenge of something that is a little bit more tricky. By contrast, you can also reinforce it by suggesting that someone is particularly good in an area. So you might, be saying somebody's really smart, or this is a real strength for them, or they're really good at a particular subject. But inadvertently, these kind of comments can actually curtail or limit what the students think they're capable of, either because they don't think there's any point in continuing to try to develop, or worse, they start to fear that if they've already been told they're very good at something, they can't show that they can't do it, and therefore they don't take on the challenges that might be required in order to try and improve that. So the kind of thing we do in school, and would actually just ask for some reinforcement at home where possible, is giving particular type of feedback. The feedback's particularly powerful when it's about the process that the students are undertaking. So when they're working, if we're making comments about the strategy that they're using, for example, if we note that they're doing it in a particularly good way and that way seems to be working, if we can talk about the amount of effort that they're putting into the process, that's also particularly positive. And again, to interpret setbacks as a lack of effort or not quite having yet found the appropriate strategies, rather than suggesting obviously the student can't do it or won't be able to do it. A good use in all of this is the use of the word yet. So by suggesting that this is the best attempt they've made yet, this is a good strategy they've used so far, these are all positive things indicating that growth is possible and that students might yet still move on and get it right. The other opportunity is to give some task praise. So when a student is doing things well and they link to our non-negotiables, or they're just generally good examples of scholarship, then to praise the actual task that's been undertaking and what elements of that task have gone well. These are all things that are growth in their feedback and therefore can lead to a much more positive mindset for the students. We know from the studies that there is a real impact of having a growth mindset compared to a fixed mindset. A growth mindset tends to focus a little bit more on learning rather than just performance, although a growth mindset can lead to higher performance in the end. And on the right-hand side, if you just have a look at those points, a lot of them are to do with the student's self-esteem, their ability to take on new challenges, how they view effort and persistence, and that being a necessary part of success. And obviously from our point of view in school, being more attentive, not wanting to try to do anything which has a negative impact on their own learning or the learning of others. So all of these are reinforced by a growth mindset. So just wanted to give an initial indication really of the strategies that we've been using since the start of term in terms of our moving on curriculum, in terms of our development of growth and positive mindsets with the students. And this is something obviously we do throughout the student's school career, and have hopefully made a positive start in that with them. Just move on next to our home learning policy. We'll show extracts of this to you throughout the meeting. But just from our point of view, our home learning policy is effectively our homework policy. Mrs. Budding's going to talk in a little while about ePraise, and she'll talk about the homework and how that's used. I just wanted to mention that in order to develop this independent learning, some of the skills that we're asking the students to do through their home learning look at different ways of this independence, but also because of the different types of home learning that we set, the range of learning that we set, it is developing different skills almost subliminally with the students. The homework will come in a variety of forms. It might be knowledge consolidation from lessons. It may be skill development from something that's been introduced. It may be pre-learning or research ready for the next lesson, or it could be post-learning to show that the student is able to apply the knowledge that they've picked up in a particular lesson. And also some of the home learning, it might result in formative feedback and how the students can improve and to go away and try and do that. Or it might result in them producing something which is summative, which means it's an end point, which means that we're going to grade it and make a judgment at that particular point, rather than necessarily giving feedback about how best to improve that for the next time. It's also just worth mentioning that although if we get to this situation, and I hope we don't, but obviously we are mindful of the local and national picture, that if we go to a period of remote learning and year 8 either as an entire cohort or parts of are having to work from home, it's just a heads up that we do our teaching through Microsoft Teams. So you may already be familiar with this application, but it is something we give instruction of obviously in advance, but where we're able to do remote learning and live lessons, they will take place through Microsoft Teams. In terms of supporting home learning, we're very grateful for what you do, and we know that you do many things already, and apologise if some of these things are already very familiar to you. But we very much see this as a holistic process. So on the one hand, it can be done in terms of the conversations that you're having in school. So if you're able to become familiar with the 5 R's as well and use some of that terminology about resilience and resourcefulness and being reflective and so on, these sorts of things will really help. We are aware, we have it with our own children too, that sometimes we'll initiate conversations when the students come home and it's not necessarily readily forthcoming about school. And something that can be done to unlock those conversations a little bit is not necessarily to talk about what the student has done and what tasks they've undertaken, but to try and have a bit more of an open conversation about what the student has learned. These conversations, from what might seem a very small change and almost semantics, can actually lead to much more productive conversations and open these dialogues about what students felt they were able to learn, how they have grown in the day, but also what barriers they faced. And therefore, it's healthy to have a conversation about those and start to unpick how the student might take things differently next time or how they might move that on. We obviously encourage healthy mind, healthy body. So within school, obviously, we stick to school food standards from the things that we produce within our Pershore kitchen. We obviously allow students to drink water and have water fountains around the school, because all these things are helpful, as are getting adequate amounts of sleep and rest, in amongst all of the other things that the students are doing. So you're supporting that at home through healthy diet, healthy mind, healthy body, exercising and so on. It is all to be appreciated and hopefully has a positive impact on the student ultimately for learning. We obviously try to create as best a learning environment as we can in school. We know that you do your best at home with that, but it really does help the student if they've got a place that they can confidently work and work in an environment which is conducive to learning where possible. So if you're able to work with them to set that up, then that's much appreciated. And all these things can have an impact on the overall motivation of the student to engage in home learning. I thought I would move on to next just to remind you about the structure of the teaching groups. This was shown initially back in July, our initial meetings, but the reason is just to help explain a little bit of how we're set up to make ourselves COVID secure. So the students as a year group for teaching purposes are divided into 2 bands, an X band and a Y band. And each band is slightly different, slightly more students in the X band than the Y band. And then within those groupings, they're divided into particular classes, which have the labels you can see on the screen just in terms of maybe an ability reference, which so far has been decided from the information we have received from middle schools and also the outcomes from the students when they took their SATs scores in SATs tests in year 6, because ultimately from there are a number of targets which are derived, which we use in school, which ultimately also include GCSE targets down the line. So we have based the settings from the outset on the information that we've had to date. Obviously, once we start to do more formal assessments in school, these groups are under review. And you can see that the group that they are identified in on the screen apply to the vast majority of their subjects, because that's called their linear group. So their linear group sees the students have the vast majority of subjects in that grouping. However, there are slightly different groupings within each band according to if they're mixed ability for technology, PE, citizenship and learn to. And then there's different groupings again within the band because the students have been set from the outset in maths. The reason I just wanted to remind you of this is because of the arrangements we have to keep the school COVID secure. So all year 8 are based in our new English block. They've had first use, as it were, of our new English block and are treating that well. And no other year group uses the English block. So the students have their lessons all within this block, except where the lessons require some specialist facilities. And currently that is for art, IT, PE, and also technology. When the students are having their other subjects in the English block, they're largely in the same classrooms, though not exclusively. We've obviously tried to keep them in the same classrooms for COVID reasons, but it's not healthy that the students are sat in the same room all day, every day with no change. So we've tried to find and strike a reasonable balance in that. Because the students are going elsewhere to specialist rooms on occasion, it does involve movement around the school. And very occasionally that movement will take place at the same time as other year groups. But just to try and mitigate against that, we do have staggered breaks and lunch times, which mean year groups are on the move at different times. But particularly indoor and what could be heavily congested indoor routes, we have one-way systems in place to try and mitigate against that. And also most of the outdoor routes that the students take, which is where they're encouraged to go when they're moving between rooms, all of this movement is transitory. So whilst it is taking place and there might be occasional contact with other year groups, it's very brief and certainly is well within the limits specified by the government presently about being within 1 metre or 2 metres of another student for 15 minutes. There's absolutely no issue there whatsoever. So just to give you some more explanation about the structures, where the students are having their lessons and what that involves in terms of a COVID point of view. Just in terms of assessment, I'll just flag up, these things will be sent out to you in other formats, particularly school newsletters down the line. But just in terms of assessment, we have 3 assessment points during the school year. So we have 2 progress checks, which is when you'll be informed about the student's most recent academic performance in terms of data checks. And they're in the autumn term and the spring term towards the end of each. And then there's a more formal report that comes to you at the end of the summer term in terms of data outcomes, but also written reports that are issued from subject teachers and also potentially the student's tutor at that stage. A couple of other things to be aware of through the academic year will come up shortly, but I just thought I'd show you at this stage also a copy of the progress check that you will receive. Now, I appreciate this may be very small on the screen. It also is something that we issue guidance on when we issue the first one to explain in more detail what I'm about to tell you. But I just thought I would introduce it at this stage for you, just so you get an idea of what to expect. First of all, you'll see for each subject that the student has been issued a target. That target means that the students have been divided into one of 3 bands according to the likelihood of their achieving a certain range of GCSE grades. And again, these targets have been derived mainly from the student's SAT scores with some other additional input. So if a student is likely to go on to achieve grades 1 to 3 at GCSE, they've been given largely core targets. If they're likely to go on to achieve or are predicted to grades 4 to 6, they're in the intermediate band. And if they're likely or have been predicted to achieve grades 7 to 9, they've been given the advanced band. And that differs by subject. And so the different shades of blue that you see will indicate which band that they're in. It then becomes a little more nuanced and specific because within each band, the students have been given a target that they're according to the security that they have within that band. So they could either be considered to be very proficient, they could be considered to be secure, or they could be considered to be competent. And that means the level of security, so top down. So if they're proficient in it, they're very secure in that band and their target is very assured. If they're competent, it means that they are deserving to be in the band, but not necessarily as secure as they might be. So the important thing at this stage is you have an idea of the type of target that they have been set from the band that they are in by the colour. But then what you will find is each term, the colleague in each subject will give a colour indicating whether or not the student is on track to achieve that GCSE grade range as they move forward. So red means they're a couple of grades out. Amber means that they're one away from their target. Green, a light green colour, means that they're on target to achieve. And dark green means they're above target to achieve. And what it means is they're on target at that point. So what we see on each term here, you've got a completed report for the end of year, is that where a student has achieved green in the autumn term, they actually needed to do a higher standard of work and higher quality work to achieve the equivalent green in the following term. Because to show they're making progress, it's inbuilt within the system. So to stay on track, they have to be improving all of the time. If they're not improving, they won't stay on track. So I hope that makes sense. There'll be more explanation to follow, but you can see, you can track the progress of the student within each term. The other couple of things to note on this report is you have judgments made for what are called AS1, Assessment Strand 1, and AS2, Assessment Strand 2. Again, in the guidance that comes when the report is issued, it tells you what each subject has been doing within Assessment Strand 1 and Assessment Strand 2. But broadly, Assessment Strand 1 means the knowledge the students have been covering, and Assessment Strand 2 are the skills they have been developing. So you'll see for each subject what knowledge they've covered in a particular term, what skills they've been trying to develop, and then you can see the judgment as to how they are on track or otherwise with that at the particular data point. The report itself also covers what's called attitude to learning. And on the right-hand side, you can see how that's mapped out across the terms. The attitude to learning follows a 5-point scale, which goes from outstanding, very good, good, inconsistent, and poor. So obviously there may often be a link between the colour judgments that have been made in different subjects as to whether a student is on track and their attitude to learning. But similarly, contrasting the two can also pick out some interesting points. It may be that a student is trying really hard and their attitude to learning is really good, but actually they're not quite getting there in terms of their knowledge or skills, and they're trying to work on that. So that might not quite match. Or you might get a student who outwardly is doing very well, but when you look at their attitude to learning, that could be better, indicating that actually they could be achieving higher, although they might seem to be on track. The other final thing just to note is that particularly for students who have very high targets, it can sometimes mean it takes them a while to get into the rhythm of high school working, and also the nature of the type of assessments that we undertake. So it may be that a student who initially has some amber or even red gradings aren't a cause for concern at an early stage, but that's something that obviously we can discuss with you and with tutors and subject teachers in due course. So I just thought I would flag that up now. I know it looks a little bit complex. I know it may seem a little bit complicated until you receive one that's for your own son or daughter at the first time that you will in December, but it'll come with a lot more guidance and explanation, and hopefully you'll be able to see the value of these data checks that we do, and then ultimately full reports. The final thing from me just in the first section of the meeting was just to refer to a couple of other assessment opportunities. So one, we have a planned parents' evening for Year 8 due to take place towards the end of February. Obviously at this stage, we're not 100% sure as to what format that will take, whether it will be a physical in-school parents' evening, which sadly is probably unlikely, or whether it will be more of a virtual parents' evening. But either way, just to mark your card and a date in your diary, it'll take place on that evening, and we'll obviously get information to you nearer the time about the format that it will take. And similarly, Year 8 have a sort of an examination window in early May. It's an examination week where traditionally we've had formal examinations for the whole year group in the sports hall to start that practice of what it's like to be sitting a formal external examination in Year 11. And those examinations have taken place for English, maths and science. The students also have other in-class assessments for all their other subjects, and the outcomes of all of those contribute to their end of year report. Clearly at this stage, I can't say whether the examination week is going to replicate fully what we've been used to in terms of all of the cohort in a sports hall, but certainly we will be undertaking assessments in some format or other around early May in all subjects in order to derive outcomes for the end of year report. So at this stage, I'll just hand over to Mrs. Budding. Mrs. Budding is going to take you through a number of issues, and then I'll just come back to you again at the end of the meeting. Mrs. Budding.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to speak to you. I'm just going to talk a little bit about our method of marking, which we call close the gap marking, and it might be a little bit different from what you're used to from your children in middle school. We don't mark every single piece of work that the students do. Instead, we pick certain pieces of work. We try and make the purpose of our marking direct improvement to our students' work. Thank you. Thank you. So the idea is that we write feedback onto our students' work with directions to improve it in some way. So the students read their feedback in the lesson and they make their improvements there and make their work better. So the students close the gap between the work they have done and the work they could have done with the feedback that the teacher has given. And that's why we call it close the gap marking. Thank you. So close the gap marking takes quite a few forms. All right, in some subjects it might be rewriting or redrafting, or redrawing in something like art, or it might be answering specific questions about the work that has been done, so expanding and developing a written answer, or it might be a sort of ongoing feedback in, for example, music or tech, where the teacher will give some feedback and it will be immediately changed and therefore improved. And here's another example of redrafting, which we call yellow box, where the teacher has yellow box around a piece of work that needs improving, a part of the work that needs improving, and then the yellow box will then be filled by the student with them rewriting that paragraph or that section, including the improvements that the teacher has asked for. It may be that you see double ticks, like at the top there, from the teacher, and that would be pointing out a particularly excellent part of the work, and it might be that the student would have to identify what was particularly successful about that piece of work. So our close the gap marking, as I say, the idea is that we see immediate and direct improvements, and that those students act upon the feedback that the teachers give, and therefore making it meaningful. What that does mean is that you won't see marking on every single page in your child's exercise book, because we will pull out particular pieces of work where there's a skill or a piece of knowledge that we would like to work on. Thank you. We do our feedback in green pen. The pictures you've just seen aren't necessarily of our students' work. So our students actually call it green pen work. Right, everyone, green pen's out, we're green penning today. Students do, they know exactly what we mean by that. So seamlessly, I'm going to move into our equipment list, one of which pieces of equipment is a green pen. It is especially important at the moment that your children come properly equipped for school, because we can't lend equipment out to students. So if they don't have it, we're not allowed to lend it out, and so it's really important that they do have a full pencil case. If I could draw your attention particularly to things like glue sticks, which can go sort of a bit unnoticed, but they're really important for making sure that a book is organised and that worksheets and diagrams and things are stuck in. And while students are in Key Stage 3, we expect that they have a reading book with them for times such as tutor times, where we may do everyone reading in class, Eric, and silent reading, and that will also happen in English lessons. I'm also going to talk to you about ePraise, our reward system. So ePraise is our online reward system. Okay, so it does do house points, but it does do other things, which we'll talk about in a second. We do like to use points to reward our students for all sorts of things. So it might be for academic success, it might be for being helpful, it might be for contributing, but the points go towards a leaderboard, both for students, for tutor groups, and for houses. So students are working towards, or houses are working towards, a house cup called the Pardo Shield, which we award at the end of each year, and we award that on the basis of the house points that have been gained throughout the year. When you log on to ePraise, you'll be able to see which house is ahead, or the position of the houses. It's on the front page of the ePraise. It's on when you log into ePraise. Also, when we give house points, milestones can be reached, and that's 10, 20, 30, etc. House points, and you'll get an email when your child hits one of those milestones. We also have achievements, and achievements are subject based. They are little stickers that come up on the front page of the ePraise when you log in, and they're given for sustained effort or particularly excellent work, more than a house point in a particular subject, and you can collect them. So each of the subjects have got their own little sticker, their own little picture, and you can collect them and see if you can get a full house by the end of the year. You can log on as parents to ePraise to see what's going on. So you go to epraise.co.uk and log on. You have to pick our school, and there's now quite a long list of schools that are using ePraise. So you have to find us right down the bottom of the lists of schools. Okay, log in as a parent using your email, and then you follow the instructions to be able to set your passwords. The most important thing is that this ePraise will only recognise you if your email address is the one that's stored in our system. It's how ePraise verifies and confirms your identity. So if you try and log in with an email that isn't on our system, it won't let you in. So if it won't let you in, that's possibly the most common reason, or most obvious reason. And so get in touch with us, and we'll make sure that your email matches the one in our system. When you look in ePraise, you can see a number of things. Now, you can see those points that I talked about, and you can see the achievements that your child has earned. Something really useful is that you can see their timetable, so you can help them get organised for the day after, and make sure that they've got all the right books and equipment that they need for school. The other thing is our homework system. So on ePraise, you'll be able to see all of the homework set by the members of staff. Now, something really useful about that it doesn't tell you on it is that you can order the homeworks, and you can either order them into ordered by set date, or you can order them by due date. And if you find out what works best for you and your child, you might well find that that helps to organise the homework so that you don't miss any, because otherwise they will come up in a big list of homeworks, and sometimes it's difficult to see which ones have been done. Your child can tick to say that the homework has been done, and they can also, if teachers asks, they can submit work through ePraise, but they would only do that if they've been asked to do so, because that needs to be set by the teacher. Okay. So Mr. Nocton talked earlier about our home learning policy. We do have a policy where our learning in school is supported and scaffolded by learning at home, and that might be things like pre-learning, or it might be consolidation of things that have been learned in class. We do ask that the students check ePraise daily to make sure that they're organised and on top of their homework and their timetable. and we ask that you give your support to your child with their home learning. Though I suspect that lots of you have got very, very good at supporting your child with home learning over the last few months. So continuing that, we would be very, very grateful. Thank you. Okay. We have a really simple anti-bullying policy. You can see the full anti-bullying policy on the website. However, if you tell us about it, we will deal with any bullying behaviour. Please remember, though, we can't deal with what we don't know about. So please come and talk to us. Contact your child's head of house or tutor with any bullying concerns, even if they're small. Okay, because we can head them off at the pass and talk to the other students involved, or talk to you about it and about how to deal with it. So we do have measures in place to support good behaviour in school. We have a behaviour policy, again, that can be seen on the website, and we teach, encourage and model respect for others around school, staff and students. If you want to email us on a different sort of email, we have an email that says support@pershore.org.uk, support at, which either you or your child can contact if you want to. That's accessed by the heads of house. We pride ourselves on supporting our students through their time at school, and think that school is an awful lot more than their very important academic achievement. But we'd like to think that our children leave here better people than when they start, that they have the skills that they need in order to access, life outside school, and be a person, be a character, be a citizen to be proud of. Through our C3, our culture, character and care, we will spend time with our students looking at all three aspects of sort of how to be a well-rounded person. And as part of our care, we have our C3 pyramid. Our C3 pyramid shows us, or shows you the support that is available for students at different times. So at different times, different people need different levels of support. All of our students will access their tutors, their house offices, and the learning, tutor times, PSHE, society and ethics lessons that are put on around school. Sometimes everybody needs a little bit of help. Okay, some students need a bit of help. We have our school nurse on site. We have peer mentors, which at the moment can't access because our peer mentors are a different year group, and a pastoral mentor. So we have a little bit of additional support within school. If we can't help, we can access support from external agencies. I've got a number of them that are mentioned on the third tier of that pyramid. And tier 4, our top bit of the pyramid, is when actually our external agencies can't help as much as we would like, and we need to access . Okay, am I back? I have just frozen. I think I might be back. Sorry everyone, little bit of technical hitching. Okay, I'm back. If you go onto our website, you'll be able to find this pyramid, and we've made it a little bit interactive. We were very proud of it. If you would like to know more about the support on any level of the pyramid, if you click on the area of the pyramid, it takes you to some documentation that tells you how to access the different types of support, and a little bit more information about the support that we can access here in school and the services that we have access to. So if you have a look around on our website and find the pyramid, you will get a little bit more information. Okay. And in school, we've got a number of people that you can contact if you need to talk to somebody or your children can contact. So your first port of call really should be your child's tutor or their head of house. Okay. Our house team and pastoral team will deal with a number of different issues. Our safeguarding team will deal with any issues concerning more serious, either emotional or physical harm. The designated safeguarding lead is myself, Zoe Budding. We have a number of deputies to support: Caroline Bassett, Dennis Campbell, our Senko, who was in our starting in September meeting, Anna Cookson, Rachel Kelmister, and Mr. Nocton. Thank you. In school as well, we have our student hub. Students may have queries about a number of things, from the location of a room to lost property, to lots of various other things. So in school, one single point of contact will be the student hub. If your child has got any concerns, they can go to the student hub. It's in the main foyer of the school. There's a big glass window, and just need to knock on the big glass window. Somebody is always in there, and from there we can work out what the problem is and who best to direct it to. And it may well be one of those people on the screen, or it may be someone else, but this would be the first port of call for your child in school. We need to keep on top of attendance, obviously for safeguarding reasons, to make sure that we always know who's in school and who isn't. And we ask that if your child is going to be absent, that you either phone the school. If you phone the school, the phone line will give you an opportunity to go to an extension which is dedicated to student absence, or you can send an email to studentabsence@ and then the school email address. Either one of those will go to our attendance officers in the student hub. We need to ensure that we know exactly where everyone is at all times, and we can do that earlier if you do your bit by sending in any absences to school. If you do that, we don't have to call you. If you don't call in, you can expect a call from us to find out where your child is on our first day absence calling system. And the emails to be in touch with the house team, so that would be a head of house or deputy head of house email. The address is below. Obviously, they're followed by our school email address, pershore.wars.sca.uk, your house centre. And last thing on this sort of little bits and pieces is personal care plans. Personal care plans are written if your child has a medical condition that we need to know about. And in that situation, we ask that you complete a PCP. Blank PCPs were sent out with the transfer packs in the summer or before the summer. So if you feel that your child needs one, please complete one and send it into school. If you don't still have it, or you're not sure, please do contact us. So what this does is it gives us information about your child's medical condition, any medication that they may need to take, how and when they need to take it, and information for emergency treatment should that be necessary. We can't bear to think of a situation where we cannot help your child because you don't have the right information. So please, if you do think your child might need a PCP, contact your child's house office and they will send you out a PCP to complete so that we have the information that we need. We talked briefly about PSHE and society and ethics as part of our C3 triangle, and I'm sure you're aware that teaching relationships and health and sex education has become compulsory as of September this year. Now, we've always taught these things in our curriculum as both PSHE and society and ethics because we believe that it supports good relationships with all others and being able to help students to make informed choices about the trials and the things that are the challenges of modern life, which are changing all the time. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what's covered in different year groups. In year 8, you can see that we talk quite a bit about our own bodies, what keeps us healthy and what changes as we grow up, but also we talk about how to treat other people. We talk about families and friends, how we treat our associates, how we treat each other in school and out, and some physical health. The kind of things we might do in class is to use scenario situations to talk about what different people should do when things go wrong. We might use video clips to initiate discussion, and we might talk about different viewpoints. Some of those viewpoints might not be what we would hope from some of our students. We encourage the students in the class to be discussing and talking and either refuting or arguing or supporting each other so that they get the chance to really talk through a subject and refine their own points of view on what can possibly be some quite contentious subjects. The next slide just shows you what's covered in the next year groups and how things change as we go through the years. So what I've got here is the relationships and sex education parts of PSHE and society and ethics. We teach PSHE in year 8 and 9 and society and ethics in years 10 and 11. These are supported by some citizenship, where we talk about things like British values, how our government works, that sort of thing, and careers, where we might talk about strengths, we might talk about making choices, we might talk about different career pathways. But what we've got in front of you is what we cover in the relationships and sex education parts of each of those subjects. As you can see, as the students get older, there are some more personal subjects covered.
Thank you. I was just going to say thank you very much indeed to Mrs. Budding. Lovely, thank you, Miss. Just going to end the meeting this evening by just talking briefly about online safety, e-safety. We're obviously aware that this can be a particularly safeguarding issue. It also links to a number of issues that we have to deal with in school. And we also appreciate this can be a very difficult area for parents and carers to try to support the children at home with. So just a couple of slides on this, and really a reference to a very useful website if you've not had the chance already, just to try and explore to develop your knowledge and understanding of this area if that's required. So obviously sons and daughters can be doing many things online. Many of them can be very positive, many of them can be very developmental, but obviously they all potentially come with some risks that we need to safeguard against. One thing I'm going to draw your attention to is just in the top right hand corner. There's a website called Think You Know, which is run by CEOP, the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Agency, the government agency, and it's excellent in terms of the support it can give. So one thing quite often that we do find is that we might feel a little bit reticent as parents, or feel that the young people know more about these topics than we do. And so quite often some of the difficulty can be in trying to initiate the conversation to start with. So one thing that we found works quite well, and feedback that we've had from parents previously, is either trying to be honest with the students and get them to try to explain to you what they know and what they can do, and you ask questions about certain platforms and softwares. So there's an element of the young person actually teaching us that opens the conversation. Another thing to agree, another way to initiate conversation is to try to draw up some kind of an agreement, if you like, about the students' online usage, and so that they understand about what they can and can't be doing, and that's been something that's been agreed between the two of you. The other thing is that the website in question has a number of very useful video clips, and again, these can be real conversation starters. It may be that you choose an area that either you as the parent or carer wish to discuss or know more about, and try to watch it together, and hope that that just initiates questions and conversation in due course. From all of the things that the student might be doing online, there's on the slide the number of risks that they might face. Now, obviously, I appreciate you're very familiar with these things. Some of these things obviously are reasonably unlikely or very extreme at the extreme end. However, we do have to be aware, sadly, that there are all possibilities for all students who are online, and therefore they must make sure that they know how to protect themselves, which is something clearly that we do in school, both within IT lessons and also through the wider curriculum, but also something that you could support at home just through your knowledge of e-safety. If there are a few things here on the slide, which again, I shall leave for reference really in the PowerPoint or just in the presentation. But they're things that you could form part of the agreement that you undertake with your child, or just as a bit of a checklist for yourself to reinforce the fact you're doing the right thing and just to make sure that you are. But these are all good behaviours and positive procedures in terms of online safety and keeping the young people safe. So just at the bottom of this slide, it has the web address for the website, .co.uk, and it has a parents section. It's particularly important, I would suggest, at the moment. Again, I know you've been through this, and thank you for how you've been supporting the young people online. But as we move to possibly, again, more of a remote learning period and the students being online more, e-safety is ever more important. So if we're able, before that happens, just to remind ourselves or furnish ourselves with the key points, I think that would be helpful. The website itself that you go to has a very clear front page. It's well worth a browse if you have the chance. It's very easy to navigate, and you can see from the clear buttons that are just here, there's a parent and carer section, and there's also sections for the young people according to their age. So there's lots of things in there. I've just highlighted a few of the things down the right hand side that you may want to look into, that you may not be familiar with, but that's just the tip of the iceberg really. There's an awful lot of information on this website all about e-safety and online safety. Which again, if there's particular issues you're interested in, please do just take the time to have a look. That would be very helpful. Again, just as a general support, you will be aware also, but in terms of some of the issues that arise online, and there's a wide range of issues, sadly, that can arise online that are not positive. These are all support organisations that you can check with. So again, we'd appreciate, if necessary, that you get in touch with us at school, particularly if the incident is having a knock-on effect to the student whilst they're in school or the people that they're mixing with. But if you feel independently of school you'd like to seek some additional support, then these are all relevant organisations that you might find you can get support from. I just thought I'd conclude this evening by a few other issues. I'm very grateful to the fact that a number of parents and carers got in touch with the dedicated Year 7 transition email ahead of this meeting. And I hope that the majority of the issues that have been raised have been covered thus far. We've tried to structure the meeting around what we believe is helpful at this point and also address the issues that you have raised. A few other just general issues I thought I'd conclude with. One is to do with the art packs. Thank you very much where you have organised these. We've had some very positive feedback about the contents of the packs themselves. Apologies for the slight delay in getting these to the students since the start of term, but we do believe that other than payments that may have been made very more recently, that students where payments have been made before this, they have received their packs now. It's still possible to order these. We do obviously think they're a good thing, or certainly to try and source their equivalent, as Mr. Reid, head of art, outlined in his letter, if you can do that from elsewhere. And again, I'm sorry to come back to it, but were we to go into a period of remote learning again for any reason, and to be equipped at home means that the types of learning that the students, teachers will like the students to undertake are more likely if they've got the right equipment. Second of all, just a word about mobile phones. It can take students a little while to get used to our rules, which we've mentioned before are really in some ways quite draconian. If a mobile phone is seen or heard, it is confiscated, and there's no reason a student can give as to why it was okay for the phone to be seen or heard by a member of staff. Particularly, what we don't want is there to be an issue between you trying to contact your son or daughter or them feeling the need to contact you during the school day. And it's always possible, but either way, it must take place through a member of staff in school. So we reinforce with the students, if they wish to get in touch with you, they come and speak to a member of staff. We can facilitate that through a landline call from school, or even them using their mobile phone, but with permission. What they can't do is just choose to get in touch with you by text or by phone themselves, because they do risk then having their mobile confiscated. Similarly, we'd ask you not to put the students in a difficult position by going through whichever is the most appropriate form at school, reception or house office or whomever, to get a message to your son or daughter, and that way mobile phones don't become an issue. We don't have a big problem with mobile phones in school, either as disruptions to learning or just generally from some of the other negative effects they can bring within school. And so we obviously have quite strict rules about that. and appreciate your support. We do, however, think it's a valuable thing for students to have in school, clearly for safety reasons, both before and after school. Just in terms of travel to and from school, again, that seems to be going very well. Thank you for your support with that. One thing we just are trying to reiterate as much as possible, particularly upon request from the bus companies, is the use of face coverings where possible. Although the government guidance currently states it's strongly recommended and nothing more, many of the coach companies are quite uneasy about having students on the bus who are not wearing face coverings for obvious reasons. So clearly, if it's a public bus, it is mandatory. If it's a school bus, county transport bus, then it's strongly recommended, but we are encouraging all students to wear them where possible. And if students are coming to and from school in the non-bus sense, please do stick to our rules in terms of dropping off in the far car park nearest to the station, and encouraging students who make their own way to school to be socially distanced and to stay away from students or friends in other year groups as far as possible. We've been very pleased with the uniform to date. We appreciate the efforts that you have gone to make sure that the students are properly attired, and they look very smart for it, so thank you for that. We also are grateful for how the students are adhering to our PE kit rules, particularly in the spirit of them and the outerwear, in trying to make that as sort of bland as possible, if you like, sticking to the colours that we've asked for of grey, navy blue or black. And apologies if obviously students have PE lessons on consecutive days in the timetable. We've tried to avoid that where possible, but the timetable is a very complex operation. So we do appreciate if you're having to turn around fresh PE kit in a very short space of time. I will just bring the meeting to an end. Thank you very much again to those of you who have attended it live this evening, and those of you that will watch it in due course as a recording. We haven't offered this evening just any interactivity, and apologies for that, because the email address that many of you have contacted in advance of the meeting is still going to be available until the end of September. So if you have questions still arising from the meeting, if there's any matters arising you'd like answers to, please do email that address, and we shall endeavour to get back to you within a reasonable time frame. And once again, just to repeat, the PowerPoint will be made available from tomorrow on the school website under the Parent tab, if you would like to access the slides, and we shall email out a link to the recording of the meeting if there's any element of that you would like to revisit going forward. So once again, thank you very much for attending. We're very pleased with how the year 8s have started at the school, and that we hope that's been a positive experience for you as parents and carers, as well as the young people and students. And we look forward to working together productively in the interests of your son and daughter throughout their school career. Thank you very much, and good evening.